suppose that you were able every night to dream any dream you wanted to dream. And you would, naturally, as you began on this adventure of dreams, you would fulfill all your wishes. You would have every kind of pleasure. And after several nights, you would say, well, it's pretty big. But now let's have a surprise. Let's have a dream which isn't under control. Well, something is going to happen to me that I don't know what it's going to be. Then you would get more and more adventurous, and you would make further and further out gambles as to what you would dream. And finally, you would dream where you are now.
Hello, everybody. Here we are on a Thursday evening in February. It's February the 8th. February the 8th on the... I don't know what to say. It's going to be a great night. We got a great guest. We have a wonderful topic of conversation. I know that probably quite a few people will have been drawn away to listen to the live streaming on one place or another of Tucker Carlson with Vladimir Putin. We're going to have that lined up for you after the show on quitefrankly.tv in its entirety, and I'll listen to it with you. I listened to a few minutes up front. We always know, because whenever Vladimir Putin has a major address or anything like that, we go and we grab the transcript, we listen to it, we circumvent the media, and we go and we listen to it for ourselves. So because we do that, we know that he has an incredible grasp on history, especially Russian history. And for the average American Western viewer to who's watching that interview, especially the opening 20 minutes, their eyes probably glazed over. I mean, he might as well have been speaking ancient Sumerian at that point, because what the hell do we, in the last 3 generations of schooling over here, what the hell do we learn that's anything relevant at all? But, you know, in that respect, that is when there's going to be knee-jerk reactions that are built into the average person. And depending on who put those reactions and put those and programmed you, they're going to come out, oh, I don't care what he says. It's probably all nonsense. Oh, this is pure propaganda. Misunderstanding what propaganda is as well. So there's a lot of that going on. The history aspect of it, I think, is, when I watch it in full, I have to imagine it's going to be the most important thing, even though to the average person, it's going to be the most boring thing. They're going to want to get around to some kind of, I don't know what. Obviously, they're going to speak very frankly about why Ukraine is in the situation it is right now. That is going to contradict everything that the mainstream media and the people standing behind them have been reporting on for the last couple of years. And to be honest, ladies and gentlemen, that's really what this is all about. When you see Hillary Clinton and every other asset that they have out there deployed, screaming, crying, outrage, whether they be neocon, neolibs, I'm sure Mark Levin, people like him are PMSing bad right now. Just don't get twisted. Don't get anything twisted of what's happening here. The bloody scam in Ukraine is a huge strategic operation to the people who run shit. Okay? The seen and the unseen. They have managed within the last couple of years to totally cancel out everything that Vladimir Putin has said, save for a few public clips that have been made and, you know, then expanded on. That's just really what it is. And now with the war at an all-time low in its popularity, and people keep wondering why the hell tens of billions of dollars are continuing to be stolen from us in its name, with us as collateral, whatever the hell their end game for the region is, that is still off in the distance. Maybe they're not too far distance, but their end game strategy for the region is I don't know. We don't know what it is, but we know that it's either they bow out and save the world a lot of trouble, or they continue to escalate it and a lot more people die. That's just what it is. And then in the meantime, that anxiety is gone too. People are checking out. There are plenty of people out there who are ready to jump ship on this bullshit. And that's the real reason why so many people are freaking out, that everybody rushed to get comments from Hillary Clinton and every panel that they can assemble on CNN about Tucker, an American journalist talking to a public figure. Is it really a matter of debate? The issue here is that they've been running an operation for 2 years and playing on the ignorance of the average American, the average Westerner, on the origin story of the conflicts that are going on in places like Ukraine is super important on everything. And for this 2-hour span, for whoever the hell is going to watch it, that window of suppression is going to be smashed open. And God forbid, Vladimir Putin might actually sound a little bit more, stable than people have said, that he's out of his mind. He's terminally ill. He has 10,000 terminal diseases all at once. He's shaking constantly. He's like Hitler at the end of the war. They don't want him to sound sound. They don't want him to sound logical or make any cogent points. That's just really what it is. We know that this is a bipartisan thing out there in Ukraine. We know that it's their all of them. They use it as a piggy bank. We know that they use it as another location in the world for unethical biological experiments, and you name it. So that's really what this is about, and just keep it in mind, because we can watch it together afterwards. It's about 2 hours long, a little bit more than that, and it's a lot of dense, localized regional history out there up front. So it's not all fireworks, but I'm sure there's going to be some good stuff in there. All right, so that's all I have to say on that. Just stay tuned, quitefrankly.tv at 9 o'clock, and we will have that playing, and we can watch it all together. All right, so tonight we're going to have a great, great guest. Her name is Penny Wittbrodt. She's known as Nurse Penny in certain circles. I had the honor of listening to this story maybe about a year or two ago. It's definitely over a year, maybe last spring. So she, and that was on Dark to Light. And it was a great story, and I knew I wanted her to tell this story on Quite Frankly at some point, so we held it off, and I was going to have her on in September. It got delayed until today. And I'm really happy to have her on right now. And after the intro, we're gonna bring her in. And she had a really incredible near-death experience. Of course, I would call it a near-death revelation. And I have a lot of questions that I had saved up from that time that she was on. Some of them I asked of her over a year ago, so they'll be fresh to all of you tonight, one way or another. There'll be time to take calls from you guys and gals, too. I hope you can send it. I don't know if we'll be able to take calls while she's on. I still have not figured that out, and I have to find an engineer to help me bridge the gap between all that. But I'll certainly be taking a look at all the Super Chat portals. So if you have questions for Nurse Penny during her story, quitefranklysuperchat.com. You can send something there. You can send questions to, in the first half, to the Rumble Rants. You can send them to the Gold Pills on quitefrankly.tv, powered by Foxhole and Pilled. And I would love to work those in, because I already have a couple of great questions saved from a while back. So that's what we have tonight. We have Nurse Penny Wittbrodt, and we'll be getting into the spiritual realm. One of my favorite things to do, because so many unanswered questions, so many, and that's what we have. So I'm glad that you guys are joining. Those of you who came to hang out with me here tonight, thank you so much, and you will be rewarded for your loyalty by being able to watch the Putin interview afterwards, if you're even interested at all. Because I'm more inclined, to be honest with you, to just read some clips from the transcripts and see what other kind of highlights come out. What can he possibly say to this audience that we haven't already picked up on? This is really just about there's craziness out there, like I said before, because they want to be able to prevent the average normie from hearing these things come from a person that they have been told is absolutely insane, but is now sitting there talking cool, calm, and collected. Okay, this is about protecting the fragile mind of the normie. It's probably not going to be so crazy to us or bombshellish to us. So either way, it'll be good to see what happens. All right, did you hear? There's a couple things I want to do. I might have to save a couple of these things for tomorrow. There crazy days and nights. Enty lawyer has been outed. Now, I didn't know that Enty was still... you read the Crazy Days and Nights blog? We definitely used to do a lot of blind items on the show. Enty has given everybody a lot of juicy stuff over the years on Crazy Days and Nights, but I didn't think that he was anonymous. But he's been unmasked by a furious ex-mistress. That's what they say. Furious ex-mistress has unmasked Enty. Now, he had the blog. I know he has a podcast. So I didn't know that he was never out there. So that's one thing. That's one thing to say. All right, a couple more. One more. Did you hear about this? It has to be, is this no, this is in Canada. Very interesting. In Canada, a dealer handed out coke samples. In an apparent bid to drum up customers for his drug business, a Canadian man handed out business cards with a small sample of cocaine attached to it, police allege. According to cops, Syed Amir Razavi, obviously a native Canadian, distributed the cards outside a casino in Calgary, where Razavi resides. Investigators learned of the cards in late December and launched a probe that resulted in February 3rd arrest of Razavi on narcotics possession and trafficking charges. A police search of Razavi's auto and residence yielded 50 baggies of cocaine, a digital scale with drug residue, $1,200 in cash, and cops also seized a box of business cards with the name Alex Lee on it. Now, cocaine is not my bag, and neither is drug dealing. But I gotta say that this is a very smart move. It's very smart to put a little bit of a sample of something on a bag. I think that's very smart. It's a dangerous business to be in, and it's probably not going to work out very well in the end. Nobody does it for long, unless, of course, you're working for the CIA or have CIA protection. Same thing. But I think that's very smart to give a little sample out and build up your clientele. So that's what we have on that front. One more, and I love stories like this. Take a look at this headline from the New York Post. Radio station baffled after a 200-foot radio tower disappears without a trace. A 200-foot radio tower in Alabama has disappeared. No one's sure how the ambitious bandits made off with the heavy steel structure. WJLX station manager Brett Elmore told WBRC, "I have tried all weekend to figure it out, and I just can't," he said. "I've been in the radio business around it all my life, and then in it professionally for 26 years, and I can say I've never heard of anything like this. I can say I've seen it all now." Elmore learned of the theft on Friday when a landscaping crew went to the rural tower site to maintain the property, but there wasn't much left to maintain. When he arrived, he called me Friday and said the tower is gone. How's it going? This is great. I said, "What do you mean the tower is gone? Are you sure you're at the right place?" He said, "The tower is gone. There's wires everywhere, and it is gone." So here's the official release. It said it's going to get out eventually, so might as well make it public before it does. "I have heard of thieves in this area stealing anything, but this one takes the cake. This morning, my bush hog crew went down a tower site, and it's gone. 200-foot tower was gone. They dismantled the tower by cutting the wires that secured it and also stole other equipment from the property." That is, now the question is, what do you do with all that stuff? What do you do with the materials? Are you using it for your own radio station? I just love stories like this because until we know exactly what happened, it could be literally anything. It could be an incredibly well-organized prank, or it could be a piece of one of the biggest conspiracies of all time. Who knows? Not us. But we'll be right back, ladies and gents. Thank you so much for everything, and I hope you truly enjoy the rest of the show.
You tune in at your own enjoyment, because it is the best show since the beginning of time. It is technological advancements and a more sophisticated approach. But like every great awakening that has preceded it, it has one iron rule. Logic is a friend and truth is essential. You are now entering, quite frankly. Now take off your pants. And jacket.
You let one ant stand up to us, then they all might stand up. Those puny little ants outnumber us 100 to 1. And if they ever figure that out, there goes our way of life. It's not about food. It's about keeping those ants in line. That's why we're going back. Does anybody else want to stay? Let's ride!
You hear me?
You.
Well, you sound like you're a little bit underwater right now.
Let me turn my my mic up a little bit. Is that better?
Oh, that sounds a lot better. It's great to have you on. How's everything been?
It's been a little crazy, but it's always a little crazy on my end, so that's nothing unusual.
Oh, I got you. I'm giving you a little bit of a feed, so you'll see me a little bit. We'll be split screen a little bit. Hey, so how's everything been? I know that you were going to be on in September. Then life took us in different places, but I'm glad to be here tonight. Are you feeling well? How's the family? Go ahead.
I'm feeling well. I had a little bump in the road and got some kidney stones and a kidney infection and sepsis, so I'm recovering from that. Luckily, they were able to finally let me go home on some antibiotics instead of having to be on the IV stuff, so that's good.
Oh, man.
We've got a new grandbaby on the way. Super exciting. Grandbaby number 6.
Wonderful. Are you a great grandma yet? How close are you that?
Hey.
I don't know. I know some very young great grandmas, by the way. I know just one.
You?
Yeah, but if you already have 6, I don't know how old the oldest one is.
The oldest one is 10.
Oh, okay. Not okay. You're not close yet.
So they're little yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to scare you.
Hey, that's all right. I was like, maybe I'm not recovering as well as I thought.
Oh, jeez. No, it's not like
I could be a great grandmother.
Not like that. It's just when I hear that many grandchildren, I assume somebody started a long time ago, but it's all understood now. So
it's all understood.
I'm glad you're feeling well, though, and I'm glad you're here tonight. And
I wasn't going to miss it. I was like, man, that timed out just perfect because I got out of the hospital Monday evening. And I'm ready, and so I was very happy. And of course, I see a lot of my folks in the chat. They're your folks too, and Zach's folks.
Well, we have a lot of crossover, and I'm very happy to have heard this story, but actually not all of it, because I remember that day with Tracy, I had to bounce maybe about a half hour before you guys really wrapped up. So tonight, I want to just let you roll with this, and I gave everybody a premise for it. You had what I would call a near-death revelation, and I want you to set the table for what happened to you, the circumstances leading to that, and then along the way, I'll be very sparing. I'll sparingly stop you to ask questions along the way for clarification. But where does the story of Penny Wittbrodt begin?
As far as the near-death experience, I mean, I had been living a pretty normal life. I was a single mom with 3 kids. I had been divorced since my oldest was 5 and was just raising them, by myself, working full-time as a nurse, sometimes 4 12s a week, and just super, super busy with 3 kids. At the time I got sick, my oldest was, or my youngest child was still in high school. I think my oldest was graduated by then. And I had actually was working at a company called Select, and they do like specialized step-down unit nursing care. So somebody who technically would be okay for an ICU but their Medicare's run out or whatever. So they put him in a step-down unit, and we try to get him off the ventilator or solve whatever problem is keeping them from being able to go to rehab or go home. And we had a patient who was an eye doctor, totally lucid, and we were going to put a deep line in his neck. And so he was the bed was really, really low, and next to the bed was a recliner. And we have these low boy beds for people who keep getting out of the bed so that if they fall, they only fall a couple inches. They don't fall and hurt themselves. So I was between the bed and the chair because our director of nursing had not told us that he had been physically aggressive to people at the hospital before he moved, and that he had knocked her down on the day of admission. So in our daily safety meetings, it didn't occur to her to mention that. And so I went in there, and had I known that, I would not have gotten between the bed and the chair. I would have not left. I would have made sure I had a path to the door. But I didn't know that. And so I was in between the bed and the chair. The doctor came up from interventional radiology with his nurse. They're getting ready to do everything, and I'm walking him through it. And so I'm like, okay, they're going to put this drape on your neck, and they're going to clean it. It's going to feel really cold. And I walked him through the whole thing. And then as they were doing it, I was like, okay, that's the drape you're feeling that we talked about, just to reassure him, because it's kind of scary.
Yeah.
And he just bolted up, like he just suddenly lost his mind and said, I don't consent to this. And he slung everything everywhere, and he punched me in the face. And I fell between the bed and the chair. And because both were so low, I couldn't get up. So every time I tried to push up, he was coming over the side of the chair, punching me in the side of the head.
Gee, really? This was all, I don't remember an assault aspect.
I might not have told that part.
Wow.
Because we tried to go through it quick.
Okay, keep going. This just took me completely by surprise. Go ahead.
So the doctor didn't know how to undo the recliner. The nurse that was with him wasn't from our floor, didn't know how to move it. And so finally a tech across the hall hears all of the noise and comes running across, unlocks the chair, pulls him off me. So all these people saw it. I finished my shift. And when I got up the next day, when I went to turn my head to the left, my vision went black. But I'm like, oh, that's not normal. And so it finally straightened out. So I went into work because I'm a nurse and we go into work. And I went into work, and it happened again. And I told them, I said, I need to go to the doctor. Something's wrong with me. So they send me over to occupational health, which is a joke. And they're like, you've just sprained your shoulder and your wrist. You're okay. We're going to put you on light duty. Set me back to work. So that was in August. By November, I was having trouble walking. I was having trouble turning my head and not being able to see, all kinds of weird things. And so finally the orthopedic doctor, so I had torn my rotator cuff and broken my wrist. So they'd said all that. And they sent me to a neurosurgeon, and he said, he's completely ruptured C4-5-5-6. You're going to have spinal surgery for that. And so work comp fought me. They're like, oh, it's a pre-existing condition, even though we had MRIs and CT scans from before. And even though the doctor was like, if you look at this MRI and say it's normal, you either don't know what you're talking about or you're a liar. And I'd never seen a doctor write that before, but they refused the surgery. We ended up having to go through my insurance, got the surgery, and it was a big one. And I was still recovering. So I got hurt in August. I had surgery at the end of November. In August, I was still home recovering and was still in the hard neck brace. And it was looking like I wasn't going to be able to return to my previous duties. And I was standing in the kitchen with my daughter making smoothies, and I made these strawberry smoothies, and we went out onto the porch, and I started feeling weird. And I'm like, wow, what is wrong with me? I feel strangely anxious, and like my tongue felt thick or something. It was strange. And I had EpiPens on hand because I had a history of anaphylaxis with shellfish, but I'd never had to use them. And so I don't even think they were in date, as far as not being expired. But it kept getting worse. I noticed I was drooling, and I'm like, okay, I'm having trouble swallowing. And I'm like, I'm having an anaphylactic reaction. What on earth? And so I gave myself my first shot, and my youngest son drove me to the hospital. And I got there, and the nurse was standing at the counter, and it was a nurse I knew in this little hospital. And I thought, oh, geez, this isn't going to be good. And so I put the EpiPens come in 2 packs. And so I set the pack on the counter so she could see one was gone, because I was having a hard time talking. And I was looking up like this talking because I could hardly breathe. And so she's like, what are you here for? And I managed to get out anaphylaxis. And she's like, well, did you take the EpiPen? And I nodded. And she's like, then why are you here? And I'm like, it's not helping. I can't breathe. And so she's like, well, we've got a room, but we don't have a bed. So I can't put you in there yet. I'm going to put you in a wheelchair. And then as soon as we get a bed in there, we'll come get you. And I'm saying, I don't need a bed. I don't need a bed. Help, And she's not helping. So she takes me in that ER, in that hospital. I know it well because I helped them set up when they expanded their ICU. I came from a bigger hospital and helped them expand their ICU. So she puts me down this hall where the doctor's sleeping quarters and the staff bathroom is. So nobody goes down that hall, very rarely, for anything. So she puts me down this hall where nobody can see me, nobody can hear me, and I'm having a harder time. It's getting more and more laborious to breathe, and I'm getting really scared. And I'm trying to call out for help, but I don't have enough of a voice. And all of these intubations have affected my voice, of course. But so I decided that I was going to have to go ahead and take my second EpiPen. And I was nervous about that because nurses really frown on you taking any of your own meds at the hospital. But I couldn't get anybody to come help me. And I'm like, I can't just sit in this chair and die. And so I took the second shot.
Well, Penny, let me ask you, did you feel any marked improvement in any symptoms after the first pen?
I did. It gave me like time.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I still was having symptoms, but I was still wheezing and everything, but I didn't feel totally closed up. And so I took the second one, started feeling a little bit better. And I'm like, okay, maybe it was just going to take that second shot. And within 15 minutes or so, I had stridor, which is when the airway starts to swell. It makes this high-pitched whistling noise. And it's how you know a patient's in trouble when you hear it. And it doesn't sound like anything else. And I'm like, oh, crap. And this nurse practitioner PA heard me and looked around the corner and said, oh, my God. And so she came running over and grabbed the wheelchair, took it into the room where there was a bed. I'm like, oh, at least we got the bed. That was important. And of course, they can't get an IV on me. I'm a horrible stick. And once you're in anaphylaxis, your blood pressure drops. So it's even harder to get an IV. And they can't get anything. They're giving me intramuscular injections of steroids and epinephrine, Benadryl. And the PA finally looks at me and she says, we got to move you across to trauma. And I thought, oh, crap, I'm going to end up getting intubated. And so they wheel me across to trauma. My husband gets there. We weren't married yet at the time. And he gets there and he takes one look at me and he tells the doctor, he's like, you need to intubate her. You're going to lose her airway. And they're like, no, we got plenty of time. She's fine. And within 5 minutes, I had completely stopped breathing and collapsed. And so I remember it. I remember him standing there to the right of me next to the bed. I remember hitting the back because I had him sit the bed all the way up because I was having so much trouble breathing and I was looking up to breathe. And I remember just feeling really relaxed and just letting go. And when I did, I popped out of my body and I heard the code call. And I thought, oh, wow, somebody's really sick. I hope they do okay. And I look down and all these people start running in the room where my body is in the bed, but I didn't recognize me. And so I see me laying there and I think, and I'm hearing the code call go off and I'm thinking, wow, I hope she does okay. And the respiratory therapist that came in had a bald spot on the crown of his head. And I wouldn't have known that because I didn't know him. I hadn't worked there in a while. And, but it was just interesting that I was able to see these things that you wouldn't have been able to see from the bed. And so I see me in the bed, and I see him, and I saw my husband kind of get shoved out as people were filing in really quickly. And that was it. Everything went black. And then the next thing I knew, I was in my sister's car. She lives in Wisconsin. We're in Kentucky. And it's late at night. It's pouring rain. And she's driving. And I'm thinking, where is she going in this weather? This is crazy. And so I look over the seat and her clothes are all wrinkled and they don't match. And I'm thinking, okay, something's happened. Something's happened to the kids or her husband. There's no other reason she'd be out looking like that this late. And so she pulls over under the canopy of a gas station and she types in a message, hang on, kiddo, I'm coming, which was actually a message she typed to my daughter in Facebook Messenger, which it was the first thing I told her when I woke up, was that I saw what she wrote. And so I decide not to say anything to her or try to touch her or anything because she's driving and I don't want to scare her. And I knew something was wrong with me. I'm like, I can't feel like the density of my body. I can't feel the seat against my butt or my legs or my back. And it felt like I was just floating in the back seat. And so I black out again. And when I come to, I'm in this really dark void. And I have no idea how big it is. It's completely black, but I have this image of what I look like there. And I don't know if it's that I could see me or if I just imagined me. But I'm suspended in the air. I'm not standing, sitting, or lying on anything. And it's crazy black. Like you can't see anything. And I wondered, is it a closet? Is it a Walmart? How big is this place? It's so dark, I can't tell. And I'm noticing it's taking a lot of work to breathe. And I get super tired because I'm worn out from trying to breathe, and I go back to sleep. And then I wake up and I'm still in this place. And so I'm thinking, okay, I got to get out of here. Like, where am I? And I'm trying to move. I can't move. And I feel this pressure holding me. And I'm really claustrophobic. And so that totally freaked me out. Went into this panic and then went back into the deep sleep again. And so I keep doing this where I wake up, get freaked out. I ask God, where is God? Why am I here? Is this hell? I knew it wasn't hell, but I didn't know where I was. And I knew it was something I had to figure out. And I was really frustrated. I'm like, there's no instruction manual. I don't know how you're supposed to figure out what you're supposed to do here. How do I move? And so eventually I figured out that if I tipped my whole body forward like that and didn't bend at the waist, whatever direction I tipped my body in, I would move that direction. And so when I first did it and started going forward, I got scared because I couldn't see anything and I didn't know what was around me, if I was going to hit anything. And so I see this light way, way, way off on the left. And it's not like a tunnel. It's like when you're driving down the street and you can see from somebody's house window five houses up that their living room light's on. That's kind of what it looked like. And so I'm thinking, okay, yes, go to that light. At least you'll be able to see. And so I tip my body that way and I fly that direction and I'm praying there's no trees because I'm going, the more horizontal I got, the faster I went. And I'm like, man, it'd suck to get plowed by a tree, after making it this far.
So, but let me just stop you right there because now you're talking about setting like real world earthly settings, trees, living room lights. Is this consciousness? You're not, and you also said that when you first popped out of your body, there's no recognizing yourself. Do you think that? Because I've spoken to I've had a couple of really amazing guests that come on to talk about specifically about OBEs. And what they would tell me about the out of body experiences is that when they initiate these experiences for themselves at night, they feel that there is immediately a stripping or a shedding of at least a few top layers of human identity, especially when it comes to care, the care that we have about human dramas and human things, the things that we obsess over every day when we're awake. Those things start to shed almost immediately. Yeah. Now, is that more so along the lines of why you feel like you did not recognize yourself, or is it because your human body in that state looked so haggard that it didn't actually look like you? What do you think that was?
I think had I recognized it as me, it would have really scared me. And I think near-death experiences are designed by God for each person who has them. So, no two are the same, but most have common elements.
Okay.
And I think for me, it really would have freaked me out and I would have gotten stuck in that state of worrying about that separation from my body.
And now in this blackness, as you're learning how to move, you just take us from there. You found a light that you want to go investigate, and here you are.
Yeah, so I'm investigating this light. I get to it, and it looks like, I always tell people when I was a kid, hotels had these really heavy, it almost looked like leaded glass blocks, and they would put them up on two sides of a shower so that you could see somebody was in there. You'd still have light, but you couldn't make out their features. And that's kind of what the wall looked like that was separating where I was from this other place. And so I look at the wall, and I can't really see anything except for that there's light coming from the other side. And so I get closer and closer and closer to it. And when my nose touched the glass, it was so funny. It was a very little girl moment. my nose touched the glass and I had my hands on it. And as soon as my nose touched it, I could see through. And it was a hospital room with me laying in the bed, and I recognized me. And I thought, oh, okay, something's happened. I've had an accident or I'm really sick or something. I don't know what all this is where I'm at, but that must mean I can get back there somehow. And so I'm trying to think of how to get back there. And I, of course, can't get through the wall. And my daughter is there. And so she's wearing a red flannel shirt, and it's August. And she's standing, the ventilator is to my right and behind me, and she's standing in front of it, which is still behind me. And I remember looking at her shirt, and I could see every single fiber in it. And I knew what it felt like just to see it. And the colors were coming off in a strange way, like they were way more vivid. And my daughter, I always tell people this, my daughter's a Scorpio, and you just never know what's going on with her. And a good kid, but just very, very private. And I felt her emotions, and I knew they were hers. And she was terrified and very sad. And it just killed me, because I'd always wanted to know what she felt inside, and she never would tell me, because she's very private. She doesn't tell anyone. And here, this first moment where I know her emotions, I go to put my hands out to her to bring her to me to hold her, because she's scared, and my hands hit the wall, and I can't get through the wall. And so I lose it. I'm ugly crying and, yelling at God. And I'm like, what is this? Is this what you do? This is some kind of torture. You show me myself, you show me my daughter on the other side, and then you put a wall between us, so I can't get to them. And I'm getting more and more worked up. And the more angry and rageful that I get, the farther back I get pulled back to where I was when I started, and I go back to sleep. And so when I wake up, I'm like, okay, don't lose it this time. Flip my body around, go back to the light. And this time the wall, instead of being like a wall, is like a bubble. And I can see it moving like you would see a bubble move if air pressed against it. And so I'm thinking, oh, wow, I could probably go through that. And so I put my hand out, and it goes through, and I see my hand on the other side. And I'm like, okay, what do I just go all the way through? Just pop in? That's what I do. I just pop in. So I put the other hand through, and I just followed it through, and I was in the room. So I'm up in this corner of the room, and I can see what's going on. I'm in the bed there. There's no one in the room with me. I looked at the IV pump, and I'm like, okay, I'm on propofol. I was looking at all the different drugs I was on, and I'm like, okay, I'm in an induced coma. My vital signs are stable. So I'm like, okay, I'm stable but critical. I'm guessing I can survive this. I see that my hands are tied to the bed, which freaks me out because I'm claustrophobic. And so I'm thinking, okay, how do I wake me up? And I didn't know how. So I thought maybe I just lower myself like a sponge, or lower myself to my body, and like a sponge, I'll get soaked back up. So I tried that. And I come down flat with my face up on my body, and nothing happens. I don't get sucked back up. And I'm like, crap, that seemed like a real winner of an idea. That didn't work at all. So then I'm thinking, I need to try to make me move. I think if I could move, then I would wake up, and then I'd get sucked back in, which seems perfectly reasonable even now to me. And so I try to move my hand. I can't do it. I get mad, and I'm trying not to lose my temper. Well, first I try to open my eyes. That's not happening. Then I'm like, try moving your hand. That doesn't work. Then I'm like, move just one finger. Come on, just one finger. Damn it, move one finger. And I can't do it. And I get sucked back, but just to the other side of the wall, not all the way back. And I'm standing there, and I know there's something I have to figure out. And so I'm thinking, I'm like, what is it? I don't understand what I'm supposed to figure out. But I knew if I could figure that thing out, I would be free. And I'm like, this place is so awful. And I just hear it in my head, you built this place. And I knew it to be true as soon as I thought it. And as soon as I thought it and knew it to be true, there was a crack at the top. It was like I was in an egg. There's a crack at the top of what would look like you'd crack the top of an egg, and then light starts pouring in this crack. And I become more sure, yes, I built that dark place. I isolated myself all those years. I built that place. And the more I realize it, the more it cracks apart. And so this huge spirit comes through. She's probably 10 foot tall. she's big, but not just big in size, big like grand, like majestic, you know? And so she comes to me, and I'm so happy to see her. I was so happy to see another person, and she's very familiar. And she puts her arms out like this, and I'm pulled into her arm. She didn't touch me. And then she puts one arm around me, and all these shards from the darkness are like broken glass, and they're trying to get in at me. And so she would put out her fist and she would punch them, and they would shatter into 1,000 pieces and be gone. And so she does this until all the shards are gone. And I'm now ugly crying in her arms. And she says telepathically to me, calm yourself, dear one. And it was like, if you've ever been put to sleep for a surgery or something like that, you can't not react to the drugs they push in. You're out.
Yeah.
And that's what it was like. And I was just immediately
calmed,
like super, super relaxed.
Almost like the letting go. When you said you felt a little bit relaxed and you let go once you popped out of your body. This was a second round of that, but in a different place.
Yeah, and my energy felt different. It didn't feel thick and cold, and my energy felt bright and happy, and like who I remembered being when I was little. And I'm just was thinking about all the things that had weighed me down, you know. And so I'm there with her, and I'm looking at her, and so I look up at her face, and she's got these brilliant green blue eyes, and they're just gorgeous. And I look up at her hair, and it's red like fire, and it's moving like fire on her head. And as soon as I see her hair, I know who she is. It's my grandma Patrius, my mom's mom. And I always tell people she was a real character. She worked at a steel stamping plant in Michigan when I was a kid. And it was like 100 and some degrees in there. It was terrible hard work for anybody, but especially for women. And they had no union or anything. And one of her friends got her arm caught in a steel stamping press. And so the employer fired her because she couldn't work anymore. And it just enraged my grandmother. And she told my dad, she said, I'm going to start a union. And he's like, Levita, they'll kill you. Don't get involved in that. She's like, I'm doing it. You know, they can't just do this to people. And they think just because we're women, we shouldn't have the same rights as men. And I remember all this. I mean, I'm like 4 years old. And so she set out to do this. And so one night she didn't come home, and she didn't come home, and she didn't come home. And I was very fretful, and I kept going into my mom and saying, Grandma's not home yet. You know, it's getting dark. Where is she? And finally this long black car pulls up, not quite a limousine, but a long black car. And the back door opens up, and she gets shoved out into the street, and they speed off. And so my dad runs out and helps her up. And they told her if she didn't quit, that they took her to the Detroit River to show her where she was going to end up.
Oh man. So, it really
yeah.
was a life or death situation.
Yeah.
Wow.
So she started the union anyway. And she died when I was really young. She died when I was 9. And, but I mean, I just remember seeing all those cars going round the curves at the funeral home and thinking, or at the cemetery thinking, we're never going to get all those cars in here. She was just beloved, you know, just a real, I don't know, just people really, really loved her.
And now here she is to you in this incredible place. You are distraught. You are full of anxiety. And then she comes. Let me just ask you, prior to this, what was your spiritual life like? Were you religious at all? Did you have any faith? Was it ill-defined? Did you have no belief at all? Where did you start out with?
Well, so I was raised Catholic, so I had always believed in God. I didn't, and I'm not saying this of all people raised Catholic, but my experience was that it wasn't a real personal God. It wasn't a God who was going to help you day to day with your life, or that you could go to with just small concerns. This was more of a God waiting to whack you on the head for the stuff you've done wrong. And that may be my misunderstanding, because we only went to the Catholic Church until I was like 7. And so made my first communion, and then my parents just stopped going to church. And so through my adult life, I would say I was a Christian, but I was a Christian that was like a Christian as a backup plan, just in case.
Just in case.
You know, I'm like, if this God is real, I don't want to be left out. And things in my life had shown me that there was a God that existed. I just wasn't sure who he was or what my relationship to him was, or if he really cared at all. And so my grandmother's there, and she's really loving. And I asked her if I was dead. And she said, "Oh, no, honey, energy isn't created or destroyed. It just changes form. That's God's law borrowed by man." And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, of course. Of course." I've seen all these people pass on in my work as a nurse, and, um, always just I felt for sure like they were going someplace else, like this wasn't the end of it. And it just was amazing to me to finally realize that there was science behind it, that energy isn't created or destroyed, it just changes forms. And that's true for us. And that's an argument that most people can't get around. And so when I learned that, I was like, okay, that's locked in. I believe this. And because it did occur to me, was I going crazy, or maybe I was making this up just to have something to think about? I didn't know what was going on, because the time in the void felt like about 10 years to me, because time there is really, really different. And everything seemed to take a really long time, but be instantaneous all at once. It's really weird. So I'm there with my grandmother, and I start crying again, and she tells me to calm down. And so I asked her if I was dead. And she told me no, that I wasn't. She said, "There's a cord that's holding you to your body. And if you decide to stay here with us, that cord will be broken. And if you decide to go back to your body, then the cord will stay intact." And I thought, okay, that seems like that makes sense. And then I was just kind of thinking about that, and she went away, and I didn't realize she had gone away. And I was just peaceful, kind of floating in this light. And then I felt this shaking, like if you ever had a really loud clap of thunder shake your whole house, just multiply that by a lot. And everything was shaking, and I was aware that everything that had ever been in all of history and everything that ever would be was shaking, with the knowledge that the Lord was coming close. And I immediately panicked. I was like, oh, shoot, think of something good that you've done, because Grandma could read my mind, and I'm sure if she could read it, God's going to be able to read it.
Yeah.
And I can't think of one nice, kind, gentle thing I've ever done.
You know what? To your own credit, that's almost like saying, "Oh, I love a certain actor." Oh, yeah, well, and then you start thinking about all the movies and you can't think of one movie that the person did. I would probably blank out on anything I was like, oh, well,
it was a lot of pressure.
It's a lot of pressure, especially when you're trying to assess yourself. It's a lot of pressure.
Because I'm thinking, if he's going to read my mind, the first thing I want him to see is something good. I don't want to be blank-minded before God. And so he gets up to where I'm at, and he's just light. And I say he for lack of better term, because the energy did seem masculine to me. And he gets there, and I thought, is this him? And he says, "I am." And in my response, because I'm just who I am 100% of the time, I guess, my response was, "Yeah, you are." I was blown away. I'm like, I have heard that a million times. I am that I am. And I never understood the weight of that. And he just was there declaring, everything that you've been told that you had a hard time believing, I am that. And everything that you didn't want to believe because it would require too much of you, I'm that. And, everything that the unknown that scares you, I am all of that. And I just was blown away, because God was a very separate thing in my life. Like, God was something I would think about or talk about when we would go to church, or if somebody was struggling, I would pray, and really pray for them. But it never felt like, like if you and I were besties, you know how that feels. You've got a best friend, and you talk to them frequently, and you don't doubt any part of their existence. Or that wasn't what God was for me. God was very much me doubting his existence, hoping it was true, hoping he was benevolent, hoping that he was righteous, and not just some pink God of love who allowed everything. And he was, I am. I mean, he just was. And I wish I could explain that better, but I'm there with him, and he's going to show me scenes from my life, and I'm already panicked. And he calmed me. And I just understood that we weren't looking at these things for him to pass judgment on me. We were looking at these things so he could teach me. And I'm like, oh. And in fact, I stood in judgment of the things I had done. And I think I was far harsher than anybody else would have been. And And it's hard because you feel that emotion that you caused someone else. You feel it as though you were them. And so we're there, and the first thing he shows me is this good scene where I'm at this grocery store, this little Save-A-Lot, which is like the cheapest grocery store you can shop at here in Kentucky. And there was a lady in front of me, and she didn't have enough money to pay for her groceries. And I had been in that situation before as a single mom of 3 kids, and she was deciding what to put back. And it was stuff that she would use, right? It wasn't the cereal for the kids. And I said, wait, let me get it. And she was just mortified. And no. And I said, really, I've been there. It's okay. Let me help. And so I gave her the change and paid for my stuff, and I walked out. And I thought, really? Like, all the good things I've done in my life, that's the one you pick? I mean, I've been a nurse, I've saved lives, I've comforted people who have lost loved ones, in a huge turn of events that they didn't expect. I've helped little kids in really bad situations, but that was the thing he brought up. And he said, let me show you why. And so he flashes forward years, and there's that same woman that I helped at the grocery store working at a food pantry. And this woman walks in, and she's humiliated. And she says, hi, I'm going to need help with some food. And the lady behind the counter says, you know what? I needed help once, and somebody helped me. Don't be ashamed. Come on over here. Let me help. And
Wow.
I was blown away. I'm like, there is a ripple effect to something that small? Because I thought, your purpose was huge things. And I didn't realize it's these small things that are in front of you every day that something tells us we should do that thing, but for some reason talk ourselves out of it. And, I always tell people, your thing today might be that you looked out the window and you saw the neighbor's trash can is still out, and she's an elderly lady. And so instead of being asked or waiting for her to fall, you go out and you move her trash can back and you say nothing. And those things really, that it was your purpose for that day. And we all have them. We all have these things where it's like, oh, I should do this, or I should go help with that. And then for some reason we talk ourselves out of it. Those are the things that change the world in this big roundabout way. And so he showed me that. And then I knew the next thing was going to be bad. And it was this woman that I worked with who I thought was terrible. And if you judged her by professional nursing standards, most people would agree. And I was never hateful to her or anything, but I always was picking up her slack, like answering her call lights, or, she wasn't going to take a patient off a bedpan if somebody offered her $1 million. That tech could be an hour away and you were going to sit there. Mm. And I'm like, what if that were your mom? I couldn't do it, so she would let me do her work. And I was like, her, really? That's the bad thing? And so God showed me how I'd had all these negative thoughts toward her, and how, even though I'd never gossiped about her, because I'm careful not to gossip, I hate gossip. Even though I hadn't gossiped about her, I had given energy to that sort of thing by thinking about her thinking negative things every time I worked with her.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. You're making, though she deserved it.
Yeah, Penny, you're making me reflect on me. Oh man, I stay. Gossip makes me feel ill, even when I'm around it. These days, especially, I've done a lot of reflecting on gossip, and it makes me feel ill. I got a lot of chatty Cathy, gossipy people in my family, and sometimes family gatherings really just make me feel nauseous. But if these are the things, I've thought quite a few things about people. I'll tell you that much, and I do every night. So this is just incredible. So this is the judgment, but it's not. It's more of a,
it's education,
and and you're in a space where you understand what's going on, because you've been sufficiently stripped of all of your human pretense.
I'm seeing it from God's point of view, and I'm seeing her as God's child. And I had this incredible compassion for her before God showed me what he showed me. I already was feeling compassion for her, and I could see where I had deflated her without ever saying a word. Just spiritually, I had done that. And they're like, God's like, a thought has energy, a word has even more energy, and an action has even more energy, but it all starts with a thought. And so he showed me her life, and she had been horribly abused, had been raped by her father from the time she was little. And I watched her life. I watched her come up and then decide to go into a caring profession. And considering what what she had gone through, she was doing a great job. They're just, and I could have used that opportunity to mentor her rather than think critical things about her. I could have not done things out of spite, like I'd get all huffy and go into the room and finally turn off the IV alarm. And I should have done something like, hey, your IV alarm's beeping. Let's go in here and take care of that. And just kind of pulled her into that and mentored her so that she would then understand, hey, that's my job. If I'm the one sitting by the door and the tech's busy, I need to get up. That will drive a patient crazy listening to that alarm go off. But I saw how I did nothing to make things better. And I only made things worse because, it's like if you walk into a room where two people are fighting, you can sense it. Well, it was the same thing. I would see her and know I was going to have to work the hall with her and be like, and my whole countenance would fall. So she had to know. But he showed me that. And then we decided we were going to go on this journey and he was going to show me something.
Okay. So then right there, the journey that we're going to stop right there for intermission. That's a great place to stop. We're going to come back in just about 2 minutes. I'm going to put you on a mute right here. Penny, you stay right there.
Okay.
And you get comfy and you just forget about everything I said about great grandmotherhood. And I'm just and when I come back, we're going to start with the journey, and then I have questions building up, and there are people out there, and I'm so glad to have you here tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, don't go anywhere. We're going to be jumping over to quitefrankly.tv, to pilled.net. Those links have been provided in all the descriptions and the links below. Please join us. I know that there's a lot of things going on the internet tonight, but this is a very cozy gathering, and I think just an incredible story to live and relive, because this is the second time I've heard it, but with far more detail. So don't go anywhere, ladies and gentlemen. We will be right back.
The rest of the show is available exclusively at pilled.net. Follow the link in the description of the episode, get signed up, it's that easy. Or head on over to quitefrankly.tv, just press play. No paywalls, no censorship, no strings attached. So head on over, quitefrankly.tv, powered by Foxhole, and pilled.net.
It's intermission time, folks. Time out to press the like button. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Welcome to Intermission.
We'll be right back.
Yeah, Intermission. Yeah, Intermission.
We're now entering, quite frankly.
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 We all support quite frankly.
Not quite.
Quite frankly.
Let's go, Brandon.
Quite frankly, in Roma, Italia.
Quite frankly. You going on Frank's show tonight?
I want to get a Coke. Can I get a Coke?
So everybody watch, quite frankly, with Frank.
Quite frankly. How dare you?
Take a little bit of an accounting of the good and the bad of what's going on with the assistance of what you have come to know as God himself. Is that right, Penny?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I always tell people there's a Facebook group for people who've had near-death experiences, and a lot of folks who haven't had experiences go to that group to read about them. And there's always a percentage of people that come back somehow believing they're God.
That they are God.
That they are God. We are all God. And I'm like, the one thing that I realized was that there is a God and that I'm not God.
I guess that's the one thing I would ask of you before we get into the next journey that you go on, because I want to hear about the journey, then I want to hear about the conclusion, and because you coming back is really the thing that blows this all away. The knowledge that you come back with is what takes this to another level that really separates it from, well, what if this was just a fever dream? It completely separates it once we get to that point. But this revelation, this was in no way, shape, or form outside of the bounds of a Christian affirmation for you. This was a Christian experience, correct?
It was.
So now my question for you is, why do you think others who have near-death experiences or whatever, they have more religiously ambiguous experiences? Especially if this is a point in a person's life where whatever they were carrying with them through life comes into the revelation of the truth at afterward. Why wouldn't God, the Christian God, be there representing himself and that truth for everybody, regardless of how they lived on earth?
I think that's a good question. And I have a book club and we're reading a book. We're getting ready to finish it. But it's called, where did I set it? Here it is. I can't reach it. Anyway, it's called Imagine the God of Heaven. It's by Pastor John Burke, and he's got a collection of near-death experience stories, and mine is in the book. And what's interesting is he talks about those experiences for people who are of other faiths. And even though they describe it a little differently, it still jives up with the God of the Bible. They may call it something else because their upbringing is different. And we still have to interpret it through our own lens, which is really difficult. So like when I first came back, I think the first thing I wrote was for NDERF, which is the Near Death Experience Research Foundation. And I don't know if they still have it, but they used to have a way you could submit your story. And they had a page called Exceptional Near-Death Experiences, and mine was listed on that page. And it's funny because I've gone back and read it since, and it's so disjointed. It's so hard to, I've unpacked it so much more since then, and there are things so like when it first happened, when I first came out of it and all of that, just for anybody who doesn't know, I have what's called a mast cell activation disorder. And that's an autoimmune condition where your body just goes into anaphylaxis for some unknown reason. We think the surgery triggered it. And I had 18 episodes of respiratory failure in 2.5 years, was on the ventilator and in comas every time.
So there was more comas after this.
Yeah.
Did you have this experience every time?
No, I had it twice. So I had it the first time and I had it the last time.
Okay.
And so we're at this point, I'm going to go on this journey with God, and something just bristled up in me. And it was like, you've got a little girl. You know how it is when she digs her heels in and she's not going to do something? Yeah. I've got a girl too. It was like that. I was very childlike in the eyes of God. And it looked very much like that looks to us when we see our young kid do it. Like he wasn't offended by it or anything. And I just bristled all up and kind of crossed my arms over my chest and dug in. And in my mind was saying, I'm not going anywhere with you. And I said, you say you love us, and we're supposed to believe that you love us and you want the best for us. But where were you when my kid's dad left? Where were you when he would promise them something and they would walk out to that mailbox every day looking for it and it never came? Where were you? I could see that falling on me because I'm an adult, but these are your children. Why would you not intercede? I prayed and prayed, just for him to have a relationship with them, not even a reconciliation. And God said, oh my goodness, dear one, you've completely misunderstood me. Let me show you. And he just does this light kind of goes in a whoosh. And there's this screen and I can see but I'm there. And I'm sitting in a set of bleachers next to my oldest son, David, and his son at the time when all this happened was 2, but in this vision, he's 5. And so I'm sitting next to David, and my grandson Cole's running up and down the field, and he's older. I can see that he's not 2. And I'm just watching him, and, his skin's tan and the sun's shining off his hair. And everything about that moment is burned in my brain. And he's smiling. And I just remember thinking how alive he looked. And my son leaned over to me and he says, "Mom, I'm going to be the dad to him that I deserved." And I thought, okay, if God, if you let this happen to us so that this would never happen to anybody else in generations to come, then okay, we'll take one for the team for that. I didn't realize that you were fixing this generational curse. And, my kids are all involved in their kids' lives, very involved, great parents. And so when he showed me that, I felt like I could let him in. And so this whole time I have this sense of my body, but it's more of a vapor, but it still looks like a body. And it's a little bit brighter.
Mm-hmm.
And so this trail comes off of this light that is God. And I have to say this part because people get all freaked out about it if I don't. So when I met God in heaven, God was the Trinity, the triune God. So with him was Christ and the Holy Spirit. Just like if you came to my door, it wouldn't be Frank, his spirit and his mind, right? So your body, your mind, and your spirit. You're all in one container, one package.
Yeah.
And that's how God was. People will get all bent out of shape. Why didn't you see Jesus? I'm like, it was understood that Jesus was with God in the light and the Holy Spirit was there too. And so this almost like a beam of light comes off of that light and it starts circling around my feet. And then it comes into my toes and I can see my toes light up from the inside. And it comes up my shins and up my legs and it gets into my middle, like my belly. And I can feel it like somebody's swirling a cloak around. And it's going around all of these visceral hurts that I had had over the years. And I could see that, I had created this prison for myself on this side. Every time I got hurt, when I found out my husband was cheating, when he left, every little thing, I had taken these bricks and I had stacked them to protect myself. I built this wall, but I had done it for so long, I didn't realize I'd built it all the way around to a prison. And so I had become my own jailer. And the love and the light of God was in me, freeing me of that. And so it goes all the way around, it comes up and around my heart. And I could feel this love in my heart. And what's really interesting about this is I read this last summer, we actually have more neurons, neurons, the things that send messages back and forth in our brain. We have more of those in our heart than we have in our brain. And I thought that was interesting because I was reading transplant stories of people who'd had a heart transplant and then went on to like the things that the donor had liked or developed a drive for the same activities that person did. And I thought, well, that would make sense if there's neurons in the heart, that part of that cellular memory would go with them. And so he's going around, he's going in my heart, it comes up my throat, it hits the back of my tongue, and I start singing. The most beautiful singing I'd ever heard, and I can't sing. And I remember thinking, if I go back, I'd like to keep that. And so then it goes up, and it's going around, and it's behind my eyes, and I can feel it's going to come out of my eyes. And so I squeezed them shut. And the light of God came through my eyelashes. It hit the light that was around me, and then it bounced back into my brain. And then it started going through all the little curves in my brain. And as it did, I knew everything. And I couldn't tell you what I knew, but I knew everything. And I knew I wasn't going to get to keep it. And I remembered like parts of my brain that I don't even use very much lit up. And I knew things in a new way. Like I had a different, more broad understanding of things, of the universe, of the world, of the nature of man. And those are the things I'm still unpacking. But so once that's all done, God takes my hand. And it was interesting because he definitely has the traits of male and female. He's definitely nurturing like a mother would be, but also righteous like a father would be, and protective like a father would be. But I can see where we're designed in his image, and unique in that design. And so he grabs my hand and we start going through my DNA. So we're going deeper and deeper and deeper down through this DNA, and we get to this spot and he stops really fast and hard, like if you were going 100 miles in a car and just stopped dead. And it was jolting. And he said, "Do you see me?" And I'm like, like, yeah, I see you. You're all around me. And he's like, no, right there. Do you see me? And I look in my DNA, and in this part of the DNA that's called junk DNA, which I didn't know about at the time, there is God. His fingerprints were all over me. And he's like, I knit you together in your mother's womb. I am your father. And I'm like, but people say you're not. People say you don't exist and you're not their God. And he said, a person can say their father is not their father, but we can look here and know the truth. I am your father. I am in you. And I knew that God was in me, but that I was not God. Just like my father is in me, but I'm not my father. And so we get to that point, and I realize I can't stay. I want to stay, but I feel like I had so let God down by not doing the things that I was put here to do. And I felt like I could stay and there wouldn't be any judgment for that. He wouldn't think any less of me, but I needed to do those things. He knit me together with his own fingers because he had things that were important that he needed me to do. And I wanted to go do those important things. And so I decide I'm going to come back. And as soon as I have the thought, he starts pulling away from me. And I can feel this chasm opening up between us. And I'm crying. And I'm like, wait, don't go. And he stops. And I said, let me remember it. I feel like if I go back and you don't let me remember it, I won't have any hope. And so I wake up. I'm in the ICU. There's a nurse sitting next to my bed. I'm off the ventilator. And she's like, well, hello, welcome back. And I say, my first words are, I was with God.
Whoa.
And she pats my hand. She's like, oh, that's nice, dear. And I'm at Baptist Hospital, I think. And I'm like, no, I mean, just now, I was with God. She's like, let me go get your family, dear. And she puts in a psych consult.
Oh, of course.
At a faith-based hospital.
See, this is incredible here. Because now we're going to get into a part of a story that I think everybody can really relate to in one way or another, and you'll see what I'm getting at because I have some questions about this. But now you are back, and your family is coming in. Now here's the big ones. Now you're tying two worlds together, and this is where really the rubber meets the road as far as how much can be put into the authenticity of your experience. Because up to this, because there's certain elements of people do a lot of drugs to try to experience what you've, even a fraction of what you've experienced. People take hallucinogens all the time. They try to reach the other side and all that, and sometimes they can have just as psychedelic an experience as you have, but they don't have some things that you have here, and that is the link, your sister in the car, the Facebook messages. Let's get into all this stuff. You're back, you're in the hospital, and now you are starting to talk with people who have been there waiting for you the whole time, praying for you the whole time.
Yeah. So I'm back, and I have to trim some out because it's a long story. Like, I don't get to talk about the grass and the flowers and the water, but that's all really cool too. But I'm back, and one of the things that I saw while I was out of my body, so just to be clear medically, I'm alive. I pop out of my body at the moment I stop breathing. And I don't pop back in until the moment that I wake up, though I do see my body. The other thing that I saw while I was on the other side was my sister sitting in a waiting room that I had never been in with my son. And so the chairs come to a corner, right? There's a corner here. There's a chair in the corner. There's two chairs on the side here. And then there's a big row of chairs here. Well, there are two chairs over from the corner. My sister's sitting here. My son is sitting here. Her purse is in between them. They're talking about, do I have an advance directive? Would I want to be kept alive on a ventilator? If so, for how long? Have I expressed this to anyone? And she pulls out of her purse this little package of Kleenex with blue Kleenex in it. And so I wake up from this coma. My sister comes in and I said, I saw what you wrote on Facebook. Like I couldn't get it out quick enough. She said, what? Hang on, kiddo, I'm coming. I saw what you wrote on Facebook. And she's like, well, somebody must have said, nobody had said anything. Like the only person who would have seen it would have been my daughter.
Because you said it was a direct message. It was a private message.
Right. So it wasn't like it was up on Facebook and I could have heard people talking about that post or anything.
So what is she? What,
you know,
does her face get drained of color at that point? Like what?
We no longer speak.
You and your sister?
I could not tell you why. She's been weirded out ever since then. And it's funny because she's a Christian. She's got some weird beliefs going on, but yeah, I mean, we don't speak. She was absolutely weirded out by it.
That was the point at which you and your sister became less and less attached to each other? That should have been an affirmation of everything.
Right. I mean, I knew that she'd pulled over under a gas station canopy, and I used to remember the numbers above the door. I don't remember the numbers above the door, but I knew the address.
Wow.
How would I know she had blue Kleenex in her purse? How would I know about a conversation that happened in a waiting room down the hall? I'd never, even when I worked at that hospital, I'd never been in that waiting room.
See, this is it. Most people would assume that the human brain is and consciousness, we're talking about like a hard drive, but here you are outside of yourself and you're recalling things that happened outside of yourself. It's you cannot. How do you explain that? How do you explain that?
Exactly. How do you explain that? I mean, how do you explain that?
Not scientifically.
That the respiratory therapist that came in was balding on his crown. I could not have seen that from the bed. And I knew who came in. I knew how many people came in. I knew what my drip rate was on the drugs that I was on. I knew what my vital signs were. I mean, I was able to see myself from the other side and determine that I was in critical but stable condition. So my brain was definitely still working, and it was connecting with things happening on this side.
So now you're here. I understand that this was very odd for your sister to take, but how are you articulating this for the rest of your family, and where does everything go from there?
So everybody thinks I'm crazy. My husband even thinks I'm a little crazy. We weren't married at the time, but we were in a very serious relationship, and I just kind of went nuts. First of all, I've never been more homesick for a place in my life. And I kept hoping every time that I would go into respiratory failure that I would die so I could stay. And if you can just imagine leaving the people that you love more than anything, because you love God more than anything once you meet him, and having to leave that person, and it being such a distance that you can't even understand it. And there was just this incredible acceptance and love. And I remembered heaven. When I got there, I was like, oh, that's right. This is real. This is real. That place down there is not real. It seems real, but it's not real like this is real. They're real in different ways. And I just didn't want to be here. And so when I first woke up, everybody comes to visit me. The nurse runs them off because I was tiring out pretty quick. And they finally close the curtain in the room. There were these big glass doors. Slide the glass doors shut, they leave. And God pops into the room, scares me to death. And I yell, and he laughs. And he's like, why are you scared? And I'm like, well, you just popped into the room. You're here. He's like, I'm always here. And I'm like, but not like that. And we had a big laugh over it. It was super funny. And he said, I'm going to give you this message, and I want you to give it to the world. And so he gave it to me, and I didn't know how I was going to remember it because I didn't have any way to write it down. But the next day I got pen and paper and wrote it down, and I shared it with no one because it was the most beautiful love letter anybody had ever given me. And I wanted it for me because I'd never gotten a love letter before. And I'm like, this is the kindest, sweetest thing anybody's ever said. And I would like it just to be intimate between us. But eventually I started sharing it. And I'll find that before we get done here. But, I get out of the hospital. So over 2.5 years, this happened 18 times. So as you can imagine, I'm in the hospital more often than not. And God had told me when I go back, he said, when you go back, start saying yes. And I didn't know what that meant really. And so the 18th time, and in the meantime, we're trying to figure out what's going on, what's wrong with me. Doctors are like, it's anxiety. And I'm like, why would anxiety swallow your airway shut? Why would you intubate me for anxiety?
Yeah.
And I told a doctor one time, I'm like, look, just because I have a vagina and you don't know what's wrong with me does not make me crazy. It just means you lack any detective skills. And I'm telling you, if I were a man, you'd figure it out. But, for a woman, it's real easy just to slap that anxiety diagnosis on people. And I'm like, why am I suddenly anxious to death? I wasn't before. I was fine until yesterday. But anyway, we go through and we finally get a diagnosis. And they said, generally what happens is it either goes into remission suddenly at around 2.5, 3 years, or you die.
Wow.
And right at 2.5 years, I went into remission. So I had that episode, that 18th episode, and I was out of my body and I was with God again. And I was so thankful. And I'm like, I'm not going back. And I said, you said you'd fix me. And he's like, no. He said, I told you to say yes. And I'm like, I know, but what about fixing me? And he's like, well, you keep saying no. I keep giving you opportunities and putting people in your path that I want you to connect with, and you keep saying no. And I was like, are you telling me that if I say yes, I'll stop having these attacks? And he's like, yes. And I literally thought, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. And I didn't say it out loud, but it doesn't matter because he can hear your thoughts. And I caught it and I was like, okay, this sounds insane. But if that's what you say, I'll give it a try. And so this friend of mine, Brian Smith, who runs a support group for people who've lost children called Grief to Growth, had knew me from the near-death experience group. And he had messaged me several times to ask me to come speak to their group in Cincy. I had said no, come up with a lie, an excuse. It didn't matter. Social anxiety, I'm not doing it. And he contacted me after I got out of the hospital that last time to check on me. And he said, I was just wondering if you'd consider. And I said, yes. And he was like, what? And I'm like, just stop talking to me now or I'll think of a reason not to do it. And that was the first talk I've done. I've done every talk since. I've not had any other episodes of anaphylaxis.
Wow.
In fact, we've tested the labs that were really crazy off. So like your eosinophil count should be under 150, I think. And mine was running about 10,000 when I was in the hospital. And nobody could figure out, nobody looked at that. Even though those numbers were there, nobody looked at that and said, wow, why are her eosinophils 10,000? She's having huge allergic responses. Maybe this is it. And that was it. But God just, as soon as I said yes, that was it. Now I've been sick with other things and had other struggles, but I've not had any more anaphylaxis.
Oh, so that.
But, I was telling you.
Yeah.
So when you start unpacking this, you're just a hot mess because you don't know what you just saw. Why wasn't I in heaven? And where was heaven? And why was Christ included in the Trinity and not a separate person? And maybe I'm Buddhist, I had no idea. I'm like, where do these biblical scriptures come from? And people say they leave so much out. And is the stuff that's left out, is that stuff that we really need to know? And what's the difference between this religion and that religion? And they all have these same basic tenets. And so I started reading the Bible more, and I've asked a lot of people. I can't find anywhere in the Bible where it says that the only way to the Father is through the Son, through Christ. I can find nothing that says you have to figure that out while you're still in your body. And the reason I say that is because I'm friends with Howard Storm, who had a hellish near-death experience. He was an atheist. And when he came back, he became an Episcopal priest. And he does that to this day. His wife divorced him because she was an atheist. And when he got on the other side, he was being torn apart by demons. And all he could remember was something was telling him to call out to God. And I think the only thing he could remember was the song, Jesus Loves Me. And so he started singing that song, and angels saved him. And that makes me think that there is time. I wouldn't leave it to the last minute like this, but there's time when you leave your body to realize who Christ is and that Christ is the way to God. And because that's how it worked for many people that I know who've been atheist. But I've talked to people who've been Muslim, and it's interesting because even there, I expected them to really have criticism or a lot of questions. And they're like, that's kind of the tenets of our faith. And then I'll get somebody who's Buddhist who's like, well, other than God and Jesus, that's pretty much the tenets of our faith. And so I think there's a lot in common, and you could fit it into any thing you wanted to just hearing it, but having experienced it, it rings very true to the Bible for me.
There's a couple of questions I have before we start wrapping up here, because I'm just so happy that we have this on the record, and I'd love to have you call in again to give any kind of commentary on related issues. But life afterward, life after something like this, anything like this, a major point in a person's life is very frustrating. The frustration is a huge part of life. I remember, I mean, one of the greatest days of my life outside of the birth of my daughter was my wedding day. And it was just a perfect day. It was beautiful. It was the people there. It was just, I love my wedding day. And I remember the day of my wedding, I was saying, you know, I had taken a couple of days off from the show. Everybody was, you know, congratulations, Frank and Lauren. It was there's a lot of anticipation going. It was a perfect day and wedged in between all these rainy days. And I felt like I had one foot in heaven and one foot on earth. And I said to myself, man, I wish I could bottle on my wedding day. I'm driving up to the golf course, and I've got some of my groomsmen in the back seat, and we're all driving up there. It was a beautiful, crisp May day, and it was so early in the morning. I was driving a truck in heaven, and I swear, I said to myself, I wanted to bottle this feeling. And I told my friends in the car, I said, guys, I've got to find a way to make this last. I got to bring this energy and this love into every broadcast I do. I am buzzing right now. And then, you know, you give it a week, and you give it a week, and you have lost all of that. I mean, you are just struggling. You're struggling. You're struggling. Remember the wedding, Frank? I was like, you know, it's... So, but I have to imagine that this is in the same category of letdown after a while. How do you maintain that? How do you maintain that after coming back and having to live amongst the humans?
The humans, yeah. I have a lot of compassion for the humans. I feel like they don't get a fair chance, you know, because there's so many lies that are being fed to them. There's so many people on the outside manipulating them that they make the truth almost impossible to find. And they do that to keep us on an uneven footing, because it's scary to be on uneven footing. It's scary to give yourself over to your faith or your God if the world is in chaos. Because, you know, you're back down to that Maslow's hierarchy of need, where you're back down to safety again. You've totally passed up self-actualization, and you're down here at safety because, you know, are we going to end up in a war? Are we going to end up with a president who completely destroys our Constitution? I mean, there's a lot going on. You know, we've got a guy being charged with a hate crime because he knocked down a Satan statue at I'm like, you're kidding me. People took down like whole statues, real statues,
yeah,
and got in no trouble. And, you know, there's this verse in the Bible that says, you know, that we're to be cautious of this time when people tell us good is evil and evil is good. And that's where we are. I mean, I see what's being pushed on us for our children. I see, you know, the perversion of innocence. And there is nothing that makes God angrier than the perversion of innocence. There's just not. I mean, I can feel the ire of God in me just thinking about it. And there's no mercy for somebody who would do that. I really don't think there is, especially some of the really dark things that are being done. You know, these aren't people who have, you know, gone down a bad path, but have some good in them where they can be redeemed. These are evil people. I don't even know if they're people, to be honest, to do something like what's being done to these kids. And, you know, just being in the hospital in the last week, I was amazed. I don't want to sound super critical when I say this. When I was a nurse, if you were my patient, I took care of you like you were my husband or my father, or I wanted you to have the compassion and feel like this person really cares about you. And so when I would go in, I would take report, assess my patient. I would sit down and say, look, I've got 5 minutes. I know it's not a lot, but you have my full attention for 5 minutes. And I'd turn off my phone that they give you to interrupt you when you're taking care of patients. And, you know, I'm like, how do you feel like this hospital stays going? What do you feel like we should be working on that we're not working on? Are you getting good rest? You know, basic things that nobody asks. And it was amazing how much of a bond I could develop with a patient in that little 5-minute window. Well, here I'm in the hospital recently, and I told my husband, I said, I was in the hospital for 4 days. One nurse assessed me. One. You're supposed to be assessed every shift. And I'm like, that is a basic lack of compassion and care for your patients that is scary to me. And when it's the rule rather than the exception, and I had been in the hospital a while back, and it was the same thing the entire time I was, and I talked to the nursing director for the unit. I said, not one of your nurses has done a physical assessment. I'd like to know what's been charted. And they're just fraudulently charting physical assessments. And I'm like, I mean, yes, that's a problem. Legally, it's a problem. Medically, it's a problem. But that's a problem with people, that you don't care about your calling, that it's not a calling for you. It's just a job. Because if it's a calling, I'm going to listen to your lungs and I'm going to listen to your belly. I'm going to turn you over and look at your skin. I'm going to make sure you're cognitively appropriate. Because I do my nursing job. I'm retired now, but I did my nursing job as though God had specifically put that person in my charge. And I wonder if, maybe they ran so many of the good nurses out with all the COVID stuff that this is what's left. And they just, and they know I'm a nurse and they're not doing the assessments, which is really ballsy if you think about it.
Hey, I just did another healthcare venting show recently where I opened up a healthcare professional line for people to call in, and it was mostly about that night was mostly about the inability to get people who need specialist attention in front of a specialist within 2 months. So there's all that, but then there's also just a general decline in bedside manner and care, like what you're talking about. When you are, and unfortunately over the last couple of years, I've spent a lot of time in and out of hospitals for people in my life, and also for the aging and dying elderly members of my family who have had to be taken care of at home with aides at home. And I'll tell you, when you find a good nurse, it is like it's almost like heaven has come down to anoint you, because for every good one, there seems to be 5 to 7 just completely dispassionate, uncaring people who are just clocking out whenever the end of the day is there. And there's really no. I understand what you're saying, Penny, and I know that you have some perspective on that from both sides of the coin. So I guess the last question I have for you right now is, since then, how do you pray? Because you didn't have a regimen, you didn't have a real religious routine or anything going into this. Now you've had such a personal experience, an intimate one there too. And I know that it will be impossible for the rest of your life to ever not acknowledge your creator. So, but how do you pray? How do you honor God since then?
I pray boldly. I pray expecting that God is going to do the thing that needs to be done, whether I'm praying for the right thing or not. Because, often we pray. I saw this in my terminal patients. You'd have a patient that's obviously terminal, like they're on their last days. And you'd have patients, they're 98 years old, they got end-stage COPD. The family's like, do everything you can, put them on the ventilator. And I'm like, that's not, just because we can doesn't mean we should. Your family member wants to be allowed to die peacefully. They don't want to have to be on life support. And so you have to pray, that what God's will is for that person would be done, not necessarily what my will is for that person. And so where we have a Wednesday morning book clubs, and we generally read books that are faith-based. And the book that we're reading has really helped me be more bold before God. And there's this thing that I do, and it's called breath praying. So, in all of the things that I'm doing during the day, I try to remember to talk to God, just like if you were here at the house and I was, doing my stuff, I would be talking to you at the same time. And so, I do a lot of that kind of praying where I'm like, God, things in this world are so topsy-turvy right now, and I'm praying for your light. I'm praying for it to be bold and blinding, and for it to shine a light on the evil that is so bright that no one can turn away from it, because that's what it's going to take. Nobody realizes how deep the swamp is. And I think they're going to be shocked if we ever get to the bottom of it, because I think it is so deep and so entangled in every part of what's going on nowadays. And I feel like it is this great battle between death and life.
Yeah.
Like one side really wants death and the rest of us are like, just please let us live and leave us alone. And I see people losing hope and getting really black-pilled because they don't believe that there's anything that we can do. And I've got one message for you. Apathy solves nothing. If you decide to do nothing, then you're part of it. Apathy solves nothing. Even if you do everything and you fail, you didn't have apathy, so you didn't fail. You did everything you could. And so I would really encourage people in that way. If you're struggling, so many people reach out to me because they're struggling with division in their family because of politics or COVID or whatever. Division at work, they feel like they can't be who they are and say obvious things, that they're being, their arms being twisted to conform to ways of language that don't even make any sense. I mean, you don't get to be plural. I'm sorry. I don't know who you are. But if I have to keep going back in the article because I see they, them, and I'm trying to figure out who they, them are, and it's just one person.
I know.
I'm like, pick a pronoun that's not plural.
Well,
I'll go along with it.
That goes to what you were saying about the picking between life and death. When I think about that, it's the little deaths. It's the death of consciousness. It's the death of language, which is the death of the death of expression. Yes. Everything that people, and it's not that people are saying, yes, pronouns and genitalia and genders. No, this is death and I want it. They don't think that. They've been sold a bad bill of goods that this is the next evolution, that this is the next step in affirming life for people. But it is death. It is death. It is cloaked in this very false promise of a new comforting future, but it is all getting worse, and they can't get that. And it comes in many, many forms, and a lot of it is just people who have been uprooted and severed from anything that will tether them to reality, and then get blown in the wind by and those who understand the way that the world and the universe really works. And the reason why I wanted to ask you about the praying is only because, hey, people like me who have had reversions in their life, we all find our way to pray, and we do our things to try to get a little bit closer to God. But you have had such a, like you described yourself as my 3-year-old daughter standing up to me and being, having that intimate one-on-one, that conversational pace with God is something very unique. Less than 1% of people can, probably less than a fraction of 1% of people alive right now can say that they've done that. So I have to imagine that your communing or communicating with God is a little bit more different, because you guys are thick as thieves right now.
It's easier to, and I realize this because I have an unfair advantage. It's much easier. I know God's voice when I hear it, and I know my internal musings when I hear them, and I can easily tell the difference. Before I couldn't. Before I was like, is that me or is that God? Is that something I'm supposed to? I just couldn't tell. And so now, and part of it is because I talk to him so much, that, I don't want to be disconnected from God. And I see so much that is the goal. Disconnection is the goal. Disconnecting you and I, so we can't have these conversations. Disconnecting you from who you are as a man. Disconnecting me from the natural realities of who I am as a woman, and trying to put something false on me and say that's now me, so that I begin to question who I am and become disconnected from myself, and then the battle's won once they've disconnected you from who you are. And it's there's a name for that. What is that called, where you degrade somebody dehumanize? It's so dehumanizing. I really feel for our boys, and the majority of our grandkids, are they all boys? No, let's see, we got cool. I can't think how many. No, the majority are girls now. But the 2 boys, I feel really bad for them, because everything that would typically be masculine is now ridiculous.
Yeah.
We treat it like it's ridiculous. A man, like men and boys are more likely to fight. That's a good trait. You have to funnel it. You have to direct it, so that they're not using it inappropriately. But there are appropriate times to be violent in the cause of protecting someone else, and they're even trying to weed that out of men. That, we're going to get rid of the police and we don't want you to stand up either. And once you get all the men to lay down, I don't know what's next.
No, yeah, that's it. That's all. And and you're spot on with all this. And I would have to say that going forward, there's so much to reflect on. But as we go into this year, it's just February of 2024, and there's going to be a lot thrown our way. The conclusion of this year is going to be insanity, one way or another. It's just going to be fever pitch kind of things. To end the show tonight, leave us with a good tiding or something to take with us into the new year, because
to the message from God.
Oh yes, give us the message from God.
Hopefully it's right here where I can get to it. I usually look it up before, but I forgot. Hold on.
Gonna sleep well after this one, I'll tell you.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Crud, what do I do with it? Hold on, one more place.
I think that you'd have this framed and on the wall by now.
A lot of people have asked me for it. I need to get it up and print it and put it up in a shop or something. Okay, so this is the message from God with my take on it. So this is from God directly. Such folly to think anything escapes my knowing, as when you were with me, all at once, all that I allowed you to know, you knew. No words were spoken, nor were they shouted. I whispered them to your spirit. I discreetly filled you with knowing. Knowing flowed into you as effortlessly as taking a breath. Is it not so? The great I am. No truer words have ever been spoken or written. The great I am is in your core. The great I am is the light. Even when I am hidden, still I am. As my energy charge sending me over each synapse in your brain, even those small fibers knew that I am. They rose and fell to the rhythm I created, to the symphony I composed, I conducted. I consider it a tragic comedy of arrogance when man denies what the smallest innervation knows. Man thinks he acts and moves outside my knowledge. How could it be so? I proclaim he does not. His own fibers clutch themselves laughing at the idea. I am the flower, the wind, the rain, the sinew, the marrow, the rock, the author, the maker, the touch that set in motion all that you see, all that you know, and all that you do not see or know. I knit you. I put breath in you. I am coded in every cell. Every nanosecond of time falls in step as I will it so. I am in you. I am in you. I am all. Even when you perceive nothing, still I am there. As I tell you this here and now, pressing my truth into your breast, your very heart presses it further in. And then this is just my little summary after that. I was so profoundly changed by my experience. I am open to being hurt and to being loved. I am learning that hurt people hurt people. I try to use kind words to turn away anger. It doesn't always work, but a soft word rarely hurts. It seems easier to discern the difference between my own internal chatter and the promptings of the Holy Spirit. God continues to do profound things in and through me. I've definitely had many difficult challenges, but I see them differently. I can choose to let circumstances break me or take those opportunities to become more. I try to engage with other people in a more real and meaningful way. I'm learning to be more authentic and vulnerable, especially when being vulnerable is hard. If I feel sad, I'm much less likely to hide it. If I feel anger, I'm much more likely to temper it with love, or at least understanding. I am flawed and beautifully so. Love carries us while pain and mistakes build us. Every awful thing is an opportunity. We can shrink from it or rise to it. I choose to rise. I used to build walls to protect myself, but the thing with wall building is this. While walls do keep people out, they also keep you in. You make yourself a captive and unwittingly become your own jailer. You limit all potential. I've been taking down those walls. Every day I tear down a bit more, one brick at a time. My prison is looking a lot more like rubble these days. It lays all around me, and I refuse to put it back up. I refuse. I am climbing on top of the remains and rubble. I see freedom on the other side, and I am claiming it. I am taking back all I surrendered. I refuse to make myself a slave or a captive, not after all God has done for me, not after how he loved me and healed me. He saw me, all of me, the good and the bad. Instead of hiding from him in shame, I chose to surrender to his presence. In that moment, when I laid myself bare before God, he took all my shame and vanquished it. He took all the good in me and magnified it. He made me more, and I refuse to squander it. God is giving me a do-over. He's giving me life and love and people to connect with. That's all in front of me now. And rather than hide, I choose to say yes. I choose to say yes. I won't shrink from it. I hope his light still shines from me. I hope it continues to just pour out, because to keep it for only myself would be theft. To give it, that's my gain. Loving others is a choice, and that choice heals me every day.
Well, that is something to take with us forward. And if everybody has that inspiring, that direction, that trajectory, that would change a lot. And it's definitely a world in need of that mentality, Penny. And I again, it'll been a long time coming. We were supposed to do this back in September, but I don't care how long it took. It was perfect tonight, and I'm so happy that you were with us. And I have all of your URLs, all the contact information is in the description of this episode. And I really hope that we get to amend this conversation in the future.
Me too. Me too. It's been fun. You're a good host, Frank.
Well, thank you. You're a fantastic guest. And please send all my love to your family and all of your grandchildren. And I will talk to you soon. I'm sure that everybody is just as pleased with your presence here tonight as I am.
Thank you very much for having me, Frank.
All right. Take care, Penny Wittbrodt.
All right. Talk soon.
Talk soon. There's Nurse Penny. And wow, we just did nearly the whole show together. And I knew it was going to be something like that. I knew it. Because it's big. It's big. And again, the Facebook messages, the waiting rooms, being inside of a car, being however many miles away. There's so many aspects of her story that keep you anchored down. You can think about all the details, you think about everything that happens in between, the dialogue with God, seeing your grandmother, the being outside of your body. Those points of observation, those always make me think, and they get you. It gets me, at least, as an audience member at that point. Much of that, I was an audience member with you, and that keeps me focused and anchored down. There are things about this that cannot be explained medically. There's things about this story that cannot be explained by a hallucination, a combination of drugs that were going on, trauma, whatever the hell it is. It's an observer of effect that separates you from your physical body. How does that, if not for the travels of the soul and the consciousness? I mean, there's so much there. Now, we were supposed to have Penny on in September, the night before we had Eben Alexander on. And, Eben Alexander, he was, he had a deeply meaningful NDE as well, while he was brain dead for days. And it's similar to how Nurse Penny was shown a scene that was to occur 3 years in the future. Dr. Eben, his tour guide in heaven was a deceased biological sister, if you remember that he wouldn't even know existed until years later. So, I mean, he's a neurosurgeon, though, and his investigations took him to a little bit more, I think some people would say, this is very new age. It didn't have all the trappings of anything that you would consider traditionally Christian or identifiably Christian, which is why I wanted to ask Penny, a person who had a Christian affirmation through her experience, why it isn't universal. That's something that the jury's still out for me, because if this is a universal truth and there is no reading between the lines and there's no crossover or anything like that, then you would expect everybody to have the same revelation, especially if you're spent however many days in heaven. You know, I understand you blip in, you blip out, you see something you can't explain, and then you're gone. But so just very, very interesting stuff. Very interesting stuff. I think that's great. Let's get to some super chats. There's not going to be enough time for a break and barely enough time for any calls, not any calls of substance. And please remember, ladies and gentlemen, as soon as we end this tonight, I'm going to, maybe within 5 to 10 minutes, just give me a couple of seconds. I already have the videos loaded up. As soon as we end this tonight, I'm going to be I'm going to be rebroadcasting the Tucker Carlson, Vladimir Putin 2-hour interview on quitefrankly.tv. So if you're watching this live, then you simply don't have to do anything but sit there. And maybe after a couple of minutes, just keep refreshing until something comes. It'll come on, but whatever. Just wanted to say that. And we'll see what the hell has happened in our absence. I'm sure the world kept turning, and we'll understand what's going on there, but we'll all be caught up before you know it. Let's get to some super chats. Stove says, in wonderful support of independent media, here's a super chat once again from the Stoobs. Always our pleasure to support, quite frankly, brother. Also, please shout out all of our best Franklies and Franciscans out there. Shout out to you all from the Stoobs. We love them. And it's so generous of them, too. Thank you. Yes, I am Laura says, great show. I loved it. Jay Britz says, hey, Frank, great show. I had seen Nurse Penny a few years back on Zach's show and had wanted to see her again. Thanks. Wow. Oh, that's right. Nurse Penny was on, she was on Red Pill 78 years ago. I know she had a relationship with Tracy for that's lasted years too. And I wanted to put some sufficient time in between her Dark to Light appearance and this one, just so that it would be fresh for people, a refresh for others. And we got a lot of details I didn't know. I did not know about the trauma. I didn't know about the assault from the man, the patient. That started off with something a little bit different. Markiki says, hey, Frank, I usually watch next morning, but I came across this Bible verse and I feel it resonates with many Franciscans and Franklies alike. 1 Samuel 17:45. I'll have to check that out later. I've got a lot of moving parts over here. You should have just put the verse in there, Markiki. That would have been good. Give me a hand here. Car Guys New England says, much love, Frank. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Over to the Gold Pills. Witchy Poo, Donisar, C. Blanche says, sorry, pal, watching Tucker. I'll be back. Well, I can't compete. Can't compete with Tucker. What do you want me to say? Esther G. Putin will have to wait. I'm here for Nurse Penny and Frank. God bless. Now, there's Esther. There's a gal I can get behind. Not like that. I'm just saying, not trying. That wasn't a, you know what I mean. I'm with you, Esther. That's what I meant. See if Lauren throws a pie at my face when I walk out of here. We'll see if she throws a banana cream pie in my face. Let's see here. Q shook me all night long. Said, God bless you and your family. And of course, Fox family. Foxhole family? Or Fox family? What does that mean? What does Fox family mean? Chai Possum, thank you. Just Jesse, thank you so much. J Sem, Empress Bitch to you. Matt177, I hope Matt liked it. He's the king of Foxhole and Pilled. Chai Possum, thank you. Zoso dude says, how can one properly express what a freaking amazing show and guest you had? Edge of my seat. Yes, it was. Edge of me, and it got you emotional some places too, because you're putting yourself in her shoes. And for some reason, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but maybe you guys and gals felt the same way, or maybe there's some of you out there who are far more skeptical than others, but it just felt like that could be, I could almost feel that. Especially the confusion and the anxiety being in that darkness and moving around, and the whole idea of you built this place up. Now, was that darkness after the fact, that place you built up because of your severing yourself from God, from whatever that source of energy is that it? I mean, anybody who considers the spiritual side of thing and spiritual health, if you don't pay attention to it at all, aren't you ignoring a huge part of our being, especially the eternal part of our being, the energy, the energy that powers this thing, that powers this ride, the spirit? You know, the other question I could have asked is the cord that keeps you tethered to your body. When her grandmother said, if you want to come with us, you can just will that cord cut. If you want to go back, you can. I have to imagine that there's some situations where you don't have an opportunity to hold on to the cord. If you've been shot in the head or anything like that, I have to imagine that's just, she was in a specific opportunity where the cord was still there, but you can let go. That's a concept. That's very interesting. Thank you, Chai Possum says, thank you, Frank Penny. Beautiful show. Sea Blanche. Winston Dave says, great show tonight, Frank. Switch Rod. Putin interview, fantastic. Prayer worthy. In Christ Jesus. Thank you, Sean Joe. The Sentinel said, Penny is such a beautiful soul, and Molly, Artie, and I enjoyed her story. We will also rewatch tonight soon. Well, I hope that you all have a great time rewatching, and we'll be able to spend some more time with each other as soon as this show wraps up in a couple of moments here, because I think that's all that has come through. And I just want to thank you guys and gals for this. We have plenty to do tonight still, because we have a whole interview, and it's a lot of history. You're going to see the difference, ladies and gentlemen. You're going to see the difference between Vladimir Putin and literally everybody that represents the United States in a public way. Okay? You could say that everything that comes out of Putin's mouth is a lie, forked tongue, whatever. Well, you know what? He has to be very intelligent to understand thousands of years of history and be able to put it together and tell the story concisely, and to be able to do what try to think, even if everything that is coming out of his mouth is a manipulation, try to imagine any American statesman or woman attempt what you're going to see just in the next 20 minutes. Okay? And we'll see how much we can do a little bit of a recap on that tomorrow. Maybe I can move some things around, and I appreciate you all very much. Thank you so much. That's it for tonight. And thank you again to Nurse Penny. We will talk to you guys soon. Be well.
I'll catch you on the flip side.
Quite Frankly is filmed before a live studio audience, and now our super chatters, starting with Car Guys New England, Stowstube, Yes I Am Laura, Jay Brits, Mark Kiki, and a wonderful array of people tossing those gold pills at me. And thank you guys and gals. There's so much more to do tonight. Do not leave. If you want to do a little bit of a group viewing of what has got so many people, millions of, probably tens of millions of people on the internet watching it tonight, and those who are selling phony bloody wars to the rest of us, very, very up in a tizzy. See you soon.